A victory landslide. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's electoral gamble looks like it paid off big. A wasteland, the Syrian city of Raqqa will need major rebuilding now that ISIS have been defeated there. And sanctions? What sanctions? The surprising source of much-needed cash for North Korea. We'll take you there. Thanks for your company, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes. Amra is off today. Welcome to CNN Today. All eyes are on Japan as the Prime Minister tightens his grip on power and a ferocious storm slams the main island. Deadly Typhoon Lan is bearing down on Honshu Island right now, forcing thousands of people to evacuate. This coming as we wait for official results from Japan's snap election. Two big stories happening in Japan. Shinzo Abe and his ruling bloc already celebrating a big win. Kaori Njoji is following this live from CNN Tokyo. It doesn't seem all that long ago Shinzo Abe's personal ratings were around 30%, and here he is, a record-breaking victory.
Absolutely. This is a big turnaround for the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and a commanding victory in this national election. The typhoon is delaying some of the ballot count in certain areas, so the final count is still not out, but it looks certain that the Liberal Democratic Party, the Prime Minister's party, and his coalition partner is going to win more than two-thirds of the seats that were up for contest in the House of Representatives. And this would mean a supermajority, and a supermajority is critical if the Prime Minister wants to pursue his dream of revising Japan's pacifist constitution. But all along, it has all been about North Korea. After repeated threats from North Korea, missiles being lobbed over the country. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say.
This election was about, firstly, the North Korean threat. You can even say North Korea is the biggest threat ever. And also, it was about declining birth rate. If we don't do something now, it will be too late. This is a national crisis that can't wait.
The rhetoric on both sides, from North Korea and also from Japan, has been intensifying in recent months, and as the Prime Minister said, he has called this a national crisis. The two-thirds majority gets the Prime Minister closer to being able to pursue a change in the pacifist constitution, which would enable him to legitimize the armed forces here and give him a bigger role. It also increases the possibility that Prime Minister Abe may be the longest-serving Prime Minister Japan has seen in the post-war period. I think these will be big reassurances to U.S. President Donald Trump, who has found a very sympathetic ear in the Prime Minister, particularly ahead of his visit to Japan and the Asian region in early November. A new government will probably be formed by then in early November. This would be the fourth cabinet the Prime Minister lines up, and I think all analysts are saying that he was likely to pursue even more his goal of revising the Constitution. And any talk of giving a bigger role to the Japanese military stokes the ire of countries like South Korea, China as well. And this will be critical, and it will be very tricky for him to navigate because he really needs the help of these two neighboring countries to rein in on North Korea. North Korea has repeatedly launched missiles this year. They've conducted a nuclear test in September, and they've threatened to, quote, sink Japan. So I think going forward, that will be an authority issue for the Prime Minister. And also, I think the test will be the U.S.-Japan alliance, which is the bedrock of Japanese national security. But it has never really been tested in a way that bigger tensions in the region would. So I think these are some of the critical points. And I think another takeaway from this national election here in Japan is the defeat of the party being run by the Tokyo governor, Yuriko Koike, who has often been cited as a potential first female prime minister for Japan. She wasn't actually in the country for this vote. She was in Paris, but she said that this was a humiliating defeat. Strategically, she said, it backfired. I think that was one of the big defeats of this election as well. Michael.
Fascinating election. Kaori Njoji, thanks so much there in Tokyo. Well, now to new images that show the wrath of Typhoon Lan. In this video from Shingu in Wakayama Prefecture, very close to where the storm made landfall. Imagine driving in that Entire roads covered in water. Julie Martin tracking this powerful storm for us. She joins us now. What is it doing? Where is it going? What's happening?
Well, the good news is it did make landfall in that area to the southwest of Tokyo about 3 o'clock this morning. It's now on the move, and it's moving very rapidly, so it's going to be out at sea before long. Right now to the northeast at 59 kilometers per hour. That's the movement. It has now passed through Tokyo as well, so the worst of the weather certainly moving into the north of Hanzu. Winds still at 165 kilometers per hour. This is the latest data we have received. Now, very good chances the storm has weakened considerably since we last got this data, as it has been encountering land. So again, the storm will be weakening and pushing out, in fact, by this evening, well out into the ocean. The main threat still, though, damaging winds, heavy rain, flooding, as we saw, and mudslides as well. And the wind field with this extremely large and powerful typhoon. Just take a look at the size here of the wind field itself. So many people encountering these winds and the very, very heavy rains coming in before the storm even made landfall. Record-setting rains in some cases, 159 millimeters here in Ice, 57 in Tottori, Suzaka at 99, and even Tokyo picked up 36 millimeters of rain. So this is record-setting territory in some cases. Owasi, it was one of those places that did make some record rainfalls there, 796 millimeters and more than 800, almost 900 millimeters there in Shingu, Japan. So looking at flooding being one of the major takeaways from this. Travel disruptions as well. Let's take a look at some video we have there. People having a tough time out on the streets along with the wind and the rain. We know that hundreds of flights were canceled in and out of Japan. Toyota also suspended production at its plants, at least for the morning shift, and about 70,000 people urged to evacuate and get out of harm's way as this storm was making landfall. Now, the good news with this, as I mentioned, it's on the move and really not going to be much of an impact any longer. But some of these rivers also threatened. A very wet October here in Japan, so many of these rivers already well at capacity. So we're going to have to wait for that data to come in to see just where they stand now. Very quickly, we're also keeping our eyes here on Tropical Depression 27 near Guam. This, according to some of our models, could take a very similar path by the next 5 to 7 days and possibly influence Japan once again. So again, we'll have to keep our eyes on this. This is the U.S. model. This is a look at Thursday around 8 o'clock local time. You'll see it there south of Okinawa. So again, keeping a careful eye on this next disturbance. Also, Michael.
Very active map you have there, Julie. Julie Martin, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Well, the U.S. President Donald Trump calling the defeat of ISIS in the Syrian city of Raqqa a, quote, critical breakthrough in the global campaign against ISIS. And he now says the U.S. will transition into what he calls a new phase of involvement in Syria. Those comments coming just one day after U.S.-backed forces declared total liberation of Raqqa, which was, of course, ISIS's de facto capital for more than 3 years. But as our Damon reports, the long battle has left the city in ruins.
The destruction of Raqqa is so vast and devastating, it's heartbreaking, and it's going to take at least 3 to 4 months before civilians can even begin to go back and try to take stock of what it is that they have actually physically lost, because that is how long it's going to take to clear the city of various explosives and mines. The civilian population now by and large languishing in overcrowded refugee camps, and among them very little celebration at the liberation of their city because of the price they had to pay for it. Everybody who we spoke to knows someone who has died, whether it's a relative, a loved one, or a friend. And when it comes to the actual physical reconstruction of Raqqa, where is the civilian council even going to begin? If we take Kobani, that saw a similar scale of destruction to Raqqa, well, only 50% of it has actually approximately been rebuilt. And the international donations that were pledged, they never materialized. People had to build their homes, if they could afford it, out of their savings. And additionally, just because ISIS has physically lost the territory of its caliphate, as we keep hearing time and time again, that does not mean that ISIS, as an ideology, as an entity capable of carrying out attacks and drawing in even more recruits, is necessarily over. What we heard from a man from Bahrain who has been detained by the Kurdish forces is that ISIS already has a plan in place. He says they have the finances, they have the means, they have the capability to morph and reemerge again. Arwa Damon, CNN, Kobani, Syria.
Meanwhile, in the Kurdish region of neighboring Iraq, dozens of demonstrators packed the streets of Erbil in protest. Their frustration was directed at a country the Kurds have seen as a close ally for some time, the United States. Our Ben Wiedemann was there among the demonstrators.
A noisy demonstration in front of a Western diplomatic mission is run-of-the-mill in the Middle East. But in the Kurdish Iraqi capital of Erbil, it's a first.
In the almost 15 years I've been covering events in Iraqi Kurdistan, this is a first for me, an anti-American demonstration. Now, it's not necessarily an expression of anger as much as it is disappointment that the Kurds have been let down by a country they thought was their friend.
Kurdish forces played a critical role in the war against ISIS, but since the Kurds voted for independence from Iraq last month, and since the central government's takeover of the disputed oil-rich province of Kirkuk last Monday, suddenly the Kurds are, once again, alone, facing a combination of Iraqi government forces armed and trained by the United States and the Iranian-backed Popular Mobilization Units. The irony is not lost here.
Why we have been attacked by the American weapons in the hands of Shia militia supported by Iran.
The American consulate was never in danger, well protected as it was by Kurdish riot police. The protest was peaceful. But the words were heated, especially when talk turned to U.S. President Donald Trump, who during the campaign pledged his support for the Kurds, but now the U.S. stands neutral in the clash between Baghdad and Erbil. Trump lied to the Kurdish people, says Bahjat Qasim, an engineer. America lied to the Kurdish people.
We had hopes in Trump, but now we don't know what happened.
What happened was realpolitik. The government in Baghdad and every country in the Middle East opposed the vote for Kurdish independence. Noisy though it was, the protest may be falling on deaf ears. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Erbil, northern Iraq.
U.S. senators are demanding the White House release more information about the deadly attack on U.S. forces in Niger. 4 U.S. troops were killed October 4 when they were ambushed by heavily armed ISIS-linked fighters. Lawmakers are expected to get a briefing on Niger in the coming week, but several leading senators have revealed they weren't even aware the U.S. was carrying out an anti-ISIS operation in the African nation.
I can say this to the families. They were there to defend America. They were there to help allies. I didn't know there was 1,000 troops in Niger. John McCain is right to tell the military, because this is an endless war without boundaries, no limitation on time and geography. You got to tell us more.
You heard Senator Graham there. He didn't know we had 1,000 troops in Niger. Did you?
No, I did not.
CNN Global Affairs analyst and online news director for The New Yorker, David Rohde, joins us live from New York City at CNN Center there. Now, it is remarkable. We got a Republican Senator, Lindsey Graham, a Democrat Senator, Chuck Schumer, saying they didn't know about the U.S. presence in the country. A lot of Congress members now saying, why is the U.S. in Niger? What are the concerns on this? Obviously, things like mission creep and exit strategy, ultimate aim, and so on.
Look, it is extraordinary, and Congress's role is oversight, and they should be knowing where American troops are around the world. I'm shocked that, you know, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer didn't know this, you know, that members of key Senate committees, the Senate Armed Services Committee, didn't know. This can be secret. It doesn't have to be, you know, leaked to the American public, but this is absolutely the right. You know, there's a group of a half-dozen top senators that are supposed to be briefed on, you know, major military and intelligence operations. And this did not happen in this case. It's very unusual. And for the troops themselves, there should be congressional oversight. Are they getting the training, the support that they deserve? That's why members of Congress should know.
Right. You know, we had the U.S. Secretary of State Tillerson calling on Iranian-backed militias in Iraq to go home now the fight against ISIS is largely done. What's extraordinary about that is, first of all, those militias are home. They're based in Iraq. Most of them are Iraqi, even though they are backed and trained in many cases by Iran. How might such a call from the top U.S. diplomat be received in Tehran, given Iran's influence on the ground in Iraq?
I think they'll, ignore this call, and the easy response is, Tillerson said all foreign fighters should leave Iraq now that ISIS has been largely defeated. That would include American troops. There are American advisors that are there, backing the government. So from an Iranian perspective, the American troops are foreign fighters. I agree with you, though. Iran's influence, it's not simply a question of removing a few militias. Iran is consistently engaged in Iraq. Many of their advisors have died there fighting alongside these Shiite militias. So calling for this, I think it isn't realistic. It's good politically in the U.S., but I don't think it'll result in much change on the ground in Iraq.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was extraordinary. When you talk about that and you see ISIS's defeat, by and large, let's say, on the ground in Iraq and Syria, Iran wins everywhere, doesn't it? I mean, it now has an even smoother route to Damascus. It's in many ways controlling a lot of what goes on in Baghdad, decision-making and the like. To see those PMUs at the pointy end of the Iraqi forces going into Kirkuk really did seem incongruous to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was shocking. It just showed, again, it's correct that Iranian influence has extended. And, the Trump administration is, maybe correct to confront Iran. How do you stop that influence? Are we going to deploy more troops? Not so much in Iraq, but in Syria. I mean, so Raqqa has fallen. Who is going to administer that city? If the U.S. wants to blunt Iranian influence, is the U.S. going to make a major commitment of, let's say, aid and civilian efforts and a big diplomatic push in Syria to push towards some kind of peace settlement or power sharing agreement? You can't counter Iran just through sort of bluster and comments. You have to counter it with sometimes military force, but also, really serious political and economic efforts. And the U.S. really hasn't done that recently under the Trump or Obama administration.
I wanted to pivot a little bit, and, former President Jimmy Carter offering to go to North Korea. How helpful might that be? He actually said he spoke to Trump's national security advisor, McMaster, about his intentions. He says he was given a negative response. But are we not yet in a couldn't possibly hurt situation?
I think any diplomatic effort in North Korea could be a positive one. The danger, though, is you don't want Carter to go in and sort of, mislead the North Koreans by promising things that, the Trump administration would never agree to. So that's the only danger. Carter is a figure that could go, and it doesn't really cost Trump much politically, but he needs to be briefed on what the Trump administration's, bottom lines are. You don't want sort of freelance diplomacy in such a dangerous situation, but it's worth a try.
Yeah, good point. As always, CNN Global Affairs and analyst, online news director for The New Yorker, David Rohde. A pleasure as always, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up here on the program, spy versus spy. Havana pays homage to Cubans who kept them a step ahead of the CIA for decades. We'll have that and more after the break. Welcome back. Weeks after the contested Catalonia independence vote, Spain now says it will dissolve the Catalan government, remove its leaders and call new elections. Catalan leaders say they will reject any direct rule from Madrid. But our Erin McLaughlin met with some in the region who think remaining part of Spain is the best option.
Nestled between the foothills of the Catalan mountains and a motorway north of Barcelona, Badia del Vallès, a working-class Catalan town and a stronghold for Spain. Residents here are adamant they don't want independence. At a local church, prayers that things stay the way they are and Catalonia remains a part of Spain. Some here say with the Spanish Prime Minister's new emergency measures to sack the Catalan government and call elections within 6 months, their prayers have been answered.
They're not going to take our autonomy from us. They will just take those who are not capable away. And in 6 months, they'll fix things. The sooner, the better.
For many here, enemy number one, Catalan President Carles Puigdemont, chief architect of the push for independence.
I would ask him to think it through because we were fine.
Badia del Valles was founded in 1975, a few months before the fascist dictator General Francisco Franco died. Spain developed it as a social project meant to be home to the area's migrant workforce. People moved here hoping for a better life. Now many fear it could all fall apart.
The most important thing for me is security, a good economy, to live like we did before. Now everything is falling apart.
But not everyone here feels this way.
Even in the most pro-Spain town of Catalonia, there are those who say they feel Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has crossed the line.
Marcos Real owns a cafe off the main square. He's outraged at the way Rajoy's handling things. After the crackdown on the October 1st referendum, he closed his business to protest the violence. He tells me Catalans were humiliated.
How do you feel about Prime Minister Rajoy moving to take direct control of Catalonia?
If I can, I'll vote, and if they don't allow me to vote, I'll do it by force, as they did it on October the 1st. This is a democratic system, and what President Rajoy is doing is skipping the law. So this is a fascist state, as it was 35 years ago.
So much emotion in this tiny town. Residents worry they have a lot to lose. Erin McLaughlin, CNN, Badia del Valles.
Well, Cuba has opened up a new spy museum dedicated to its long-running intelligence battles with its neighbour to the north. That would be the United States. But as it opens, the US is investigating some modern intrigue, those mysterious sonic attacks against its diplomatic personnel in Cuba. Patrick Ottman shows us more.
Welcome to Cuba's Museum of State Security. Dedicated to the shadowy intelligence service that protects Cuban interests at home and abroad, the museum opened in August. On nearly every wall are interactive touchscreen panels, a first for Cuba, and exhibits like this one on the number of assassination plots against former Cuban President Fidel Castro. 637 by Cuban officials count. Not surprisingly, the U.S. government, in particular the CIA, plays the role of El Malo, or the bad guy. According to Cuba, the CIA has waged a clandestine war against the Cuban Revolution for decades. Declassified U.S. documents have confirmed several plots. Cuban First Vice President Miguel Díaz-Canel, who is next in line to succeed Raul Castro, was among the first to visit when the museum opened. Sometimes it's inexplicable, he told Cuban state media, that a country so big, so powerful, has dedicated so much time, resources, evil, and perversity to destroying the revolutionary process. Crosses on a wall signify each Cuban killed in attacks. There is a room where people can relive the gruesome aftermath of what the Cubans say was the CIA bombing in 1960 of a ship carrying weapons from Eastern Europe. Bloodstained shirts of revolutionaries who fell decades ago were saved and are now on display. We're in a museum that shows the Cuban government's version of some of the bloodiest events of the Cold War: espionage, sabotage, assassinations. Cuba says that it wants to have a better relationship with the United States, but at the same time will never forget this history. But lately, U.S.-Cuban relations have been strained by mysterious attacks on U.S. diplomats serving in Cuba. U.S. officials say the attacks left the diplomats with hearing damage and concussion-like symptoms and may have involved sonic weapons. While the culprits have not been identified, President Donald Trump says Cuba bears some blame.
I think Cuba knew about it. Sure. I do believe Cuba's responsible. I do believe that, and it's a very unusual attack, as you know, but I do believe Cuba is responsible.
Cuba denies any role in the attacks, but part of the reason U.S. officials feel the Cubans must have some involvement is that the same intelligence service celebrated in this museum knows so much about what goes on in Cuba. A historian that specializes in intelligence matters says Cuban spies are good, but not that good. They've neutralized plots, but it's not that they're omnipresent, he says. The plots are diverse and constant. Cuba says the sonic attacks may be an effort to damage the country's reputation. Just the latest in a decades-long campaign against the communist-run island. So don't be surprised if the sonic attacks earn their own place in this museum dedicated to Cuba's long history of intrigue. Patrick Ottman, CNN Havana.
Well, President Donald Trump says the U.S. is prepared like you wouldn't believe. for North Korea. We'll have details on the latest comments coming up. Also, North Korea goes to some far-flung locations looking to circumvent sanctions and finance its nuclear program. We'll tell you how some African countries are helping in a major way. We'll be right back. Welcome everyone to CNN Today. I'm Michael Holmes. Let's update you now on the top stories. In Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe celebrating what looks like a resounding victory. Exit polls indicate his ruling bloc will hang on to a two-thirds supermajority in Sunday's snap election. Now that lays the groundwork for Mr. Abe to amend the constitution and become the country's longest-serving post-war leader. Meanwhile, Japan has been getting walloped by powerful Typhoon Lan. It crashed into Honshu Island as a Category 3 storm, but has grown weaker since then. Tens of thousands of people were urged to evacuate. Hundreds of flights were cancelled. At least 2 deaths are blamed on the storm. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is urging Iranian-backed militias who helped defeat ISIS in Iraq to go home. He said the Iraqi people needed to be able to regain control and rebuild their lives. Tillerson's comments came after a rare high-level meeting in Riyadh between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Well, the U.S. President Donald Trump is confident the United States is ready for any threat North Korea might pose. During a televised interview on Sunday with Fox News, Mr. Trump boasted, quote, "We're prepared for anything," with regard to recent tensions between the U.S. and North Korea. Now, in that same interview, Mr. Trump also said he is confident in his relationship with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He has, of course, been critical of China in the past, specifically about its handling of Pyongyang. But now he's full of praise for the way China is handling North Korea.
China's really helping us, and we'll see with respect to North Korea. Look, 93% of the things going into North Korea come through China. China is big stuff.
Well, North Korea's covert operations across Africa to help fund its nuclear program are not helping the U.S. Namibia is under fire from the U.S. for bypassing UN sanctions and helping Pyongyang. Our own David McKenzie went to a North Korean construction headquarters just outside the Namibian capital.
A quick drive away from its picturesque downtown, behind this high-walled warehouse, Namibia's sleepy capital holds a secret. When did the North Koreans leave?
Maybe, let me say, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
2 weeks ago they left.
Yeah.
And who was operating there? The North Koreans?
Yes.
Just weeks ago, say eyewitnesses, North Koreans living and working in the sprawling compound, in clear violation of UN sanctions. They grew their own food, moved in and out with trucks. Then they vanished. But the building's title deed still shows it's a headquarters of North Korean state company Mansudae. As sanctions have squeezed, the North Korean regime searched globally for foreign cash to fund its illicit nuclear and missile program. And across Africa, they found willing partners in historic allies. In Namibia's capital alone, the National Museum and statue of founding president, Heroes Acre, commemorating independence, even the recently finished presidential palace, all built by the North Korean state in their trademark totalitarian style. But the contracts aren't just artistic. Outside the capital, it's just scrubland. You'd never know what you were looking for. Inside this Namibian military base, the UN investigators say that there's a North Korean munitions factory. A violation of sanctions in place for nearly a decade, and a sensitive topic for a major recipient of American aid.
Starting last year, we have started sending them out.
The Deputy Prime Minister says the relationship is now over, and that they have given regular reports to the UN investigation team.
The activities that has been taking place in Namibia, in which the Koreans have been involved, could not really be considered to be generating such a heavy amount of money to fuel the nuclear development in North Korea.
But the lead UN investigator disagrees. He says they haven't received those reports for more than a year. CNN's multiple attempts to reach Mansudae and North Korean authorities were unsuccessful.
Is this money insignificant for North Korea?
This money is highly significant. We're looking at least 14 African member states where Mansudae alone was running quite large construction operations, building everything from ammunition factories to presidential palaces to apartment blocks.
The panel is investigating scores of African countries for their contracts with North Korea's Mansudae and its military.
Has Namibia been cleared by the UN panel?
No, it's not been cleared by the UN panel. It's not enough to say you've been exonerated by the UN for North Korean sanctions violations, because that's not true. The panel deals with hard facts, with evidence, and this is what we've been asking for Namibia for many months now.
In Namibia, the pressure seems to be having an effect. The North Korean building site of the new defense ministry has ground to a halt for now. Its dealings with North Korea have become a thorny issue. David McKenzie, CNN, Windhoek, Namibia.
The World Health Organization has removed Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe as a goodwill ambassador less than a week after making the appointment. Health experts and rights activists were stunned by the pick because of long-standing corruption and abuse of power allegations against Mr. Mugabe. The head of the World Health Organization had praised Zimbabwe's policies on healthcare, but critics pointed out that the system has suffered since the nation's economic collapse. And, by the way, President Mugabe himself travels abroad for medical treatment. A very famous painting by Renoir, but you might be surprised to find out where the original is, especially if you're the President of the United States. We'll explain in a moment. You're watching CNN Today. U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to allow the release of secret documents on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. But it appears Mr. Trump has left open the possibility that some documents could still be withheld. Kim Hutchison with the details.
President Donald Trump tweeted Saturday that he's planning to authorize the release of classified government documents that could reveal new details on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Included in the release will be documents from the FBI and the CIA. A 1992 law known as the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act requires more than 3,000 previously classified documents be made public by the law's 25th anniversary, which is Thursday, October 26th. The only person who can prevent the release of these documents is President Trump, who still has the power to withhold any or all documents he believes could pose harm to U.S. intelligence, law enforcement, the military, or U.S. foreign relations. Some historians who've studied the assassination do not believe these documents will lead to any bombshell discovery in the Kennedy assassination. One historian applauds Trump's decision.
I applaud the fact that President Trump's releasing these documents. You know, historians have wanted this release done for a while. It's CIA, FBI files. What happened with the assassination of John F. Kennedy is still, parts of it are a mystery.
One of those mysteries includes Lee Harvey Oswald's trip to Mexico City weeks before President Kennedy's assassination. I'm Kim Hutchison reporting.
U.S. President Donald Trump reportedly is willing to cough up his own money for his staff's growing legal fees related to the Russian investigation into alleged interference in the 2016 election. According to reports in the Washington Post and the website Axios, Mr. Trump could spend at least $430,000 out of his own pocket on legal teams for campaign aides and White House staff. Well, perhaps he could take some of that money selling a painting he owns. He says it's an original Renoir. The problem is the real painting has been hanging in a museum for more than 80 years. Jeannie Mose explains.
Forget about fake news. We're talking about fake art. Is that really a Renoir in the president's Trump Tower apartment? Visible in the background as Melania did an interview.
What annoys him? What's he get mad about? What does he like? Stupidity.
Back when Tim O'Brien was writing his book, Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald, the Renoir was hanging in Trump's plane.
And I asked him about the painting, and Donald said, that's an original Renoir.
And I said, no, it's not, Donald. And he said, that's the original. That's an original Renoir. I said, Donald, it's not. I grew up in Chicago. That Renoir is called Two Sisters on a Terrace, and it's hanging on a wall at the Art Institute of Chicago.
The Art Institute confirms it's been there since it was donated by this art collector in 1933. The Institute told the Chicago Tribune, we're satisfied that our version is real. Now the president's Renoir is being referenced in quotes, called a fake in various languages, the butt of jokes. His is signed by Renoir, so it's all good. Next thing you know, the painting was popping up all over. Hey, I have one too. Got mine at the gift shop in Art Institute of Chicago. Before the election, Two Sisters on a Terrace hovered over a 60 Minutes interview.
He's entitled to make a mistake every once in a while.
Theorized one poster, without a doubt, Trump bought a forgery, but the master huckster can never admit he was swindled. Biographer Tim O'Brien had a different take.
He believes his own lies.
Remember the bogus magazine discovered on the walls of Trump golf clubs? Someone tweeted about the painting. Was it hanging next to his fake Time magazine cover? It is now. Somebody's been framed. Jeannie Moe, CNN, New York.
And do check out more of our stories on our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/CNN Today to catch up on the best stories and interviews from the show. Our producer who monitors this page, Deborah, says like us, because her pay depends on how many likes we get. Do comment on the stories at facebook.com/CNN Today, but be polite. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes at HolmesCNN. Don't forget at Amra CNN, or she will email me while she's having a day off. World Sport is ahead with Vince Cellini, whose Twitter escapes me. What is it? What is it? There you go. Vince_Cellini. Come in. I'm waiting now.